Dungeons & Dragons characters are a lot of fun to make, but it's not always easy to do so. Math, classes, proficiencies, they all add up and take the joy out of what should be one of the most amazing processes in the world, making heroic characters to be able to play in Dungeons & Dragons. See, I make a lot of D&D characters. A lot of D&D characters. In fact, I based what is half of my job essentially around doing just that. I even have a dream of doing it full-time someday. But first, we have to start small, one character at a time, which is why I made this series, to teach everybody how to make fascinating and amazing characters out of the limited options given to us by our overlords over at Wizards of the Coast. How does it work? Well, it's simple. First, I pull my lovely patrons for a bunch of descriptive words to be able to put in a single character. 6 words, in fact, usually background, class, or something of the like. Once I have all those words, I ship them off to a poor hapless artist who has no clue what's going on and ask them to make something out of this with only those words. Once I've commissioned them and pay them, they get to work and they start to make an amazing character. I don't put any input on it and I get to see none of the art until they send it back to me. Once I have that art, I take it in, I approve it, I bask in its glory, and then I bring it over to a stream. Once I've streamed to my viewers, we all sit down and we make a character from levels 1 to 20, developing the backstory, the build, the class, the spells, anything that could go into this character, all based off of the art that's been provided to us. Essentially, we pull an entire community of D&D players to make a single, fleshed out, incredible character. We then take this character and offer it back to the community to use as a player character, an NPC, or even a villain. This is D&D Character Creation. Now, this episode's character is a wild one because it's so exciting that I'm pretty sure that I'm going to end up playing it myself in one of my campaigns as a player character, eventually. But I'm getting ahead of myself. First, we have to figure out what we got here. See, when I pulled all my patrons, here are the words that they gave us. We then took all of these words, specifically the one on traumatized, which I was interested about, and we shipped those over to an artist. The artist was amazing, incredibly efficient, and also super kind, and was able to give us this. This incredible art was done by @Saneve over on Instagram. At least I think that's how they pronounce their name. I know them personally, so I should have asked them, but I didn't. I apologize in advance. Nonetheless, they created this fantastic art, which is probably one of my favorites that I've received so far, and really evoked a certain feeling of excitement within me. So I took that and I went to stream and we started to make things. And after getting incredibly sidetracked, oh yeah, and having a heart-to-heart talk with a lizard. Do we need to have a chat? See, I'm doing very important stuff right now. I'm making a Dungeons & Dragons character, and that's you know, it's really important. You're not listening to me. Like, I want you to be able to connect with me on a certain level right now. Sir. We eventually were prepared to be able to make our character, and we got to work. Now, with all that out of the way, I want to go ahead and jump right into this character because it is one I am very, very excited for. So ladies and gentlemen, and all those in between, allow me to introduce you to Zara Oceansoul, the Gliding Tempest. Zara Oceansoul looked across the plain with a light smile playing along their lips, feeling an odd sense of excitement brimming within their chest. You gotta be kidding me. A gruff voice from behind him spoke as a tall, orcish figure stomped up next to him, looking down at Zara's eyes of glinting anticipation. You're really out here with that fucking expression on your face. You realize we could die, right? Zara barely even changed expressions while looking up at him, lightly jabbing his meaty side with his slim elbow. Oh, come now, Bucket. There are so many different ways of looking at it, and you've decided to focus on the single most negative one. We could also win handily, and go down in history as ferocious and talented warriors who saved the day. The orc scoffed and rubbed the back of his neck. Yeah, easy for you to say with all the generals fawning over your ass. Funny how quickly they change their tune after one decent performance or two out of you. 1 or 2 decent performances? You wound me, my capable companion. I believe they said I danced across the battlefield. That hardly sounds like something one would say about a decent performance. Zara responded with an upturned chin and an ever-growing grin. Immediately, the orc grit his teeth and began to grind them together. You're insufferable. Only a fucking maniac gets this excited for a war. With that, he turned and began to stomp away with a huff as Zara maintained his ever-present smile. A maniac, or maybe just someone who's finally found their calling. Zara stared down the oncoming forces with heavy breathing. However, unlike all those in the battalion who stood by his side, his deep gulps of air were not due to fear. They were due to anticipation. His hand gripped tighter around his spiked mace as he looked over at Barquette and twirled the weapon within his fingers. Ready for another dance? Or are you still having second guesses about being heroes? Shut up and keep your eyes forward, he snapped, his steely gaze remaining tightly set on the fast-approaching battalion of armed knights. You might enjoy this, but I've got a missus to get back to. Take it seriously. Zara immediately scowled and turned back to the enemies filling the horizon. Quite the buzzkill you are today. I'll keep your pretty face alive, don't worry. Pretty, Barquette scoffed in response before letting out a somewhat forced chuckle. You want to talk, Sparkleface. Zara gave one last look at his companion and let out a full-sized grin. You're right, I'm giving you far too much credit. Let's get that ugly mug of yours back to your poor wife, shall we? Mere moments after this statement, the two sides collided with full force. It took less than a second for deafening shouts, clashes, and cracks to begin to ring across the battlefield as lives from both sides were taken near instantaneously. Zara, despite all their bravado and confidence, was initially taken aback from the concussive force of the paladins in front of them, wielding holy weapons of light that caused force unlike anything he had ever experienced to push back the front line several feet just from the initial assault. Hells of Nine, they brought the holy blades! Barquette shouted in surprise as they stepped in front of Zara, using their massive tower shield to block the blows and keep their far smaller companion safe. You've done so well you scared the shitheads into attacking with the best men! Proud of yourself now? Oh come on, you can't blame this all on me. I'm one person, not a one-man army. Yet, Zara retorted quickly. Screw off with the gloating and the pompous crap. If you want to be that impressive, earn it. Gliding Tempest, start dancing. With a determined nod and a firmly pressed smile, Zara steadied their mace in their hand and let out a deep breath. As the wind swarmed through his lungs, he gently drew the spike of his mace across his arm and let blood flow over the weapon while he incanted the arcane words which he knew by heart. In seconds, the blood evaporated and transformed into crackling purple and pink energy, dancing along the mace as he crouched down to prepare his assault. With pleasure. With that, he sprinted forwards, planting his foot on the square of Barquette's shoulder blades before using him as momentum to vault over his shield, diving directly into the swarm of well-disciplined paladins. As he landed and brought down the mace with a thunder and crack that rung out, immediately he heard shouts and cries from the warriors which were difficult to identify individually, but they all seemed to be saying the exact same thing. Gliding Tempest. God, it felt good to be known. That's right, lads. Your worst nightmare has arrived. Zara shouted with glee as he began to dance around their blades, expertly dodging their attempts to strike at him as he struck at any opening he could see. Joints, open helmets, kneecaps, anything was fair game to him. Paladins might have had numbers and size, yes, but that was their weakness. In such small quarters, with such large weapons, they could barely move to try and strike him down. Each swing they took ran the risk of striking their ally next to them, and thanks to Zara's thin form, he could easily slip in between them, confusing them and using them as his own shield. The battlefield was his playground. Zara! Barquette's voice boomed over the violence, sounding particularly far away at this point. Zara, fall back! I can't hear you, my overworried friend. What was that? Zara responded in a giddy tone as they clashed their weapon into the side of a knight's skull. I said fall back! Now! I'm afraid I can't do that. You worry too much. Trust me. I've got this. You idiot! Fall back! Unfortunately, Zara ignored the command as they continued to dominate on the battlefield. After all, they were fine. Better than fine. This was the most dangerous, ruthless foes he had ever been against yet, and they couldn't even land a scratch on him. He felt invincible. Despite himself, he found laughs forcing its way out of his chest as he gleefully battled in ways he didn't even know he was truly capable of. Finally proving to everyone exactly what he had always prayed was true. He was one of the deadliest fighters in his battalion. No, the whole army. He wasn't sure how long he had fought, but in the end, with the chaos he had managed to create, his battalion had begun to advance on the enemies, and they had to retreat. Zara let out a shout of victory and immediately began looking across the field for his friend as his enemies disappeared into the skyline. Barquette, did you see? He practically giggled as he started to search with vigor. Barquette! His joy began to falter as his search continued to bear no fruit, leading to his elation turning to a churning worry. Oh, come on. Where are you, you giant green oaf? Barquette! His voice cut off as it forcefully left his throat. There, in front of him, he saw him, his friend, laying on the ground, heaps of enemy bodies surrounding him, and a holy blade planted directly in his chest. No, he whispered as he rushed forwards, dropping to the orc's side. Barquette, how? To his shock, Barquette let out a choking gasp as he looked over to Zara, his eyes already looking glossy and unfocused. You idiot. You left me open. No, I didn't mean to, I swear. I was just dancing. Yeah, I know. It was pretty good, too. You were making idiots out of those fancy spell swords. I didn't mean... Oh gods, this is one of their swords, isn't it? That means...
Yeah, little guy. I don't think I'm gonna be bouncing back from this one.
Zara grew quiet, tears beginning to roll down his cheeks as he choked back a sob. I'm so sorry. I promise, I didn't...
Down. What's done is done. You made a mistake. Now you gotta live with it. That's just how it goes. Just do me a favor, yeah?
Zara, now beginning to full-on sob, could only nod his head weakly.
Tell the missus it wasn't my fault. She'd hate if it was my fault. I really tried, but...
The last words from his mouth never came. Zara stayed there, with his body. The battle continued on in the distance, but for the first time since he discovered his gift, he didn't care. After all, what was the use of dancing through a battle when it meant he left behind a friend? If only he had learned that lesson just a little bit sooner. So, Zara Oceansoul. This was an interesting character to create, and that story was a little bit longer than the ones that I usually do. I'm gonna be honest, I'm really proud of it. It's probably my favorite one that I've written and performed so far, and I put a lot of effort into it.
Pat yourself on the back.
If you guys didn't like it, well, please let me know. And if you did like it, please let me know in the comments below either way. Essentially, let me know if you liked it or not, so I know if I want to make more content like this or if I should adjust. Ultimately, I am an entertainer, and I want to entertain all of you. But with that being said, let's talk about Zara Oceansoul. This was an interesting character to make specifically because of one single prompt that was given to us that we had to send over to the artist, untraumatized. Now obviously the artist didn't exactly have any way of putting that into the art, though I think she did an amazing job with what she had. However, untraumatized was something that essentially went into the backstory, not necessarily the character itself and the art that they were presented with. And so we had to figure out as a stream how to not traumatize this character. And we tried. There were many times where the stream itself tried to find a way of untraumatizing the character by essentially saying they killed their whole family, but they didn't feel anything for it, and so therefore they were untraumatized.
That's not how it works.
Which I felt was a little bit cheap. And so instead, I decided to go with untraumatized leading to what created this character in the first place. They were a blood hunter who had learned these abilities, but they hadn't been traumatized by it. They'd simply learned these abilities because it was one of the many forms of magic to learn in the world, and they were forced to be enlisted. And so they found a power that they could use in a war that they were being forced to fight in. And so as they went on and they tried to figure out this power, eventually they became so confident and had not received the trauma that they should have, that they got somebody important to them killed. And that's where, unfortunately, Barquette ended up passing. And that was sort of what I went with this character. Because see, blood hunting is an interesting thing. It is inherently a very, well, edgy sort of magic. But I didn't want to lean into it too much with this sort of character. And so I presented blood hunting as a sort of art that could be taught by anybody. It is something you could just learn. It's one of the tools of the world. And while it is a less pleasant one, this character, Zara specifically, had been forced to do so in order to prove themselves. Because see, Zara was a very thin frame, a very pretty face. In fact, many times people misunderstood who he was and thought that he was a woman. And that never really bothered him a ton until enlisting in the army. Because somehow his appearance meant he was less than, and everybody began to put down on him. They didn't consider him a worthy threat, and so he learned blood magic and trained to be able to be an important force on the battlefield. And as they went into the battle, they realized that their small frame, their lithe movements, and the fact that they had gotten so used to being able to dance or perform these things in their childhood, they were able to mix it all together to create a very deadly type of martial art that they then fought with in order to be able to defeat their opponents.
Toxic masculinity is dead! I dance now!
And in that moment, suddenly, they were respected. Zara received the respect that he thought he deserved because he was able to go into this battle and fight against everybody and win. And he felt a feeling of recognition and excitement. And suddenly war was a way for him to receive the recognition he so craved. And that's where he began his downfall. He began to become a warrior, he began to become almost a celebrity. The entire war began to hear his name and it went to his head. He began to feel like he was worth something, and in the end, that would get his friend killed and force him to realize what his problem was. And that leads us into the build, because we decided not to go full Blood Hunter. We did choose Blood Hunter, yes, but we also decided to go a few levels in Monk. And the reason for that is, after this incident, after realizing the mistake he had made, he took a vow of pacifism, and he chose no longer to fight, and so he went to go seek where he could and found a monastery which would train him in these ways. And so he did begin to learn the way of peace, not specifically the monk class way of peace. We actually went with Ascended Dragon just to nail in that lightning theme a little bit more, flavored more as not necessarily the dragon side of him, but the lightning side of him still coming through in his fight. But the monk portion was him trying to learn how to take peace, how to no longer fight and reduce his desire for violence for recognition. And that would ultimately be his largest struggle that he would go through for the rest of his life. And this creates a very interesting character both as an NPC, a PC, or a villain. Because as a villain, eventually they could snap and just totally go into this mindset of violence and need for recognition and create a very relatable villain. Or as a player character, it could be a very interesting dichotomy of trying to be a pacifist but having that craving for violence because they know they're good at it. And as an NPC, it can be a very fun ally because the party knows of their reputation. This is the Gliding Tempest, a powerful creature, but they're refusing to fight. They'll go along with the party, they'll help them out, but they won't help in combat, and it makes a very interesting character. But nonetheless, there's so much you could do with this, and I love this character, and I'm very excited to play them in my games. So hopefully you guys like them too, and if you do, please make sure to do the stupid YouTube stuff, like, comment, etc. But thanks for watching. I hope you guys have a great day. Go out into the world, make it your own. Don't forget to have a great day, and never forget, play early. See you later.
A huge shout out to all those divine bastards over on our Patreon that helped make this video happen. Big D the Cool Guy, BKPW, Diet Blue, Duplicolor, Sassy Productions, Sorit, Supreme Court, Talia Martin, Tenai, Void Mystic, and Volpe Nico. We wouldn't be able to do what we do without our patrons, and we are very thankful for your continued support. You guys are the absolute best, and I will never take your support for granted.